I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin here from What's Your Work Fit? I hope you're having a good and successful week. We'll get to our wonderful guests momentarily, but first I want to say thank you. Thank you to every one of you who has become part of the What's Your Work Fit family. We could not grow this live show, this experience without you, without your questions, and without your full support. I don't do a lot of paid promotion. Actually, I don't do any. I build this experience organically through one by one engagement. And so how do you engage with this? If you are new to this experience, this is your first time here, I encourage you to join us on the platform or platforms of your choice. We do LinkedIn Live. We also have the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel. You can subscribe to one or to both. Next up, you can engage with our brand new What's Your Work Fit Substack, which you can find at dansmolin.substack.com. And I really like this experience because on it, you can get everything that we do, the posts that we write, the clips that we put out after every live show. We also have a link to the YouTube channels, live and pre-recorded shows, and also our audio podcast is linked here as well. You can join up for free for now. We're not going to charge admission. And again, the handle there is dansmolin.substack.com. One more ask, and that is if you enjoy the experience that you're getting here on What's Your Work Fit, I have a simple ask. Tell 5 of your friends and colleagues to subscribe to us on the platform or platforms of their choice. That's it for the shameless self-promotion. We'll get right to it. It is my great pleasure to welcome to What's Your Work Fit our guest today, Jen Marr. How you doing, Jen?
Hey, Dan. So great to be here.
Jen comes to us from Lake Country in Wisconsin, where it's always sunny. Let me tell you a little bit about Jen. She is a social wellness innovator, an entrepreneur, a corporate life escapee. We'll talk to her about that. And author of several books, including a new one called Lifting Up: The Transformative Power of Supportive Leadership, which hits bookseller shelves in the next few days. You got a lot going on, my friend.
Yeah, excellent. I'm so excited. Excited to be here, especially talking about this new book. There it is.
So tell us about the book. What's it about?
Well, my background is definitely in, you said social wellness, but also really the human behavioral skills of care and support. I started much more on a peer-to-peer level, really helping people navigate peer-to-peer relationships when people are struggling. And what do you know when to say? What do you say it? What's all needed? And so we dove into this, doing research studies, and my original books, my last book, Showing Up, is just about that, the art of presence, how to be somewhere. once that came out, we knew we needed to go the next level because
Mhm.
as a leader, you need more than just the art of presence. You actually need tangible skills. You have to have conversation frameworks. You have to know what are the boundaries? What are the boundaries between HR and a mental health resource? And where do I go? And this lack of confidence and understanding how to support those people that report to you
Mhm.
is driving a lot of disengagement in our workplace. So that's why I wrote the book.
Well, that's a good tee up for our question today, which we posed to you in pre interview, I want to say 6 months ago, but wow, how prescient. Our question to you is, how do I build culture amidst volatility and uncertainty? We live in a VUCA world, my friend. Get us started. How do we do that?
Mm. Well, I just want to start off by saying, like, the first chapter of my book talks about VUCA, so we're on this wavelength, right? Um, I like to start with the understanding that if we are living in a VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, our lives are disrupted. Like,
Mhm.
let's just start with that premise, right? If our lives are disrupted, it starts with the individual lives disrupted. And if the bulk of individual lives are disrupted, the organization's disrupted, right? An organization can't survive when the majority of people within that structure are disrupted. Systems around it to get them through it. Um, in the beginning part of the book, I ask, like, how did you get to be where you are? Who is responsible for saying, hey, go for that job? Or have you ever thought about doing this? Or I think you'd be really good at that. Um,
Mhm.
People that see and guide us are everything in our lives. And what's happened is through this massive shift to technology, which in some cases is good, it's kind of left our humanity a little bit behind. And so those human skills um, are what's needed. And in some cases, what I like to talk about are just bringing those basic things back into the equation and giving leaders the confidence of knowing in this disrupted work when there's no time. Let's face it, leaders themselves are stretched thin. But recognizing if everyone is around you is dealing with stuff, you're wasting a lot of time by not addressing that. And when you get that right, it actually makes things work so much better. So much stress is taken off your plate and the plates of others if you are aligned in how you're getting your work done, what projects you're focused on, what support you need to get that done, what you can take off your plate. All those things happen with a supportive boss that guides you through hardships.
So much of what we talk about here has to do with team dynamics. And yet, the headlines seem to focus around what happens in the C suite.
Mhm.
C suite leaders think in aggregate. I've got a workforce of 100,000 people. I don't know them by name. I don't know their preferences. I don't know what keeps them up at night, which is a shame that they don't know frontline people the way that team leaders do. This seems to fall on team leadership to make happen. What are some of the difficulties for first time leaders, but also veteran leaders in creating the kind of engagement that I would imagine starts with the foundation of trust? Can you speak to that?
Wow. I mean, there's so much in what you said because I could go in a whole bunch of different angles. I mean, let's start with the fact that trust is not built unless you have a solid relationship with someone.
Right.
And as our organizations have gotten so spread thin with such an enormous amount of overwhelm and work and pressure, there are studies out that will show that a majority of employees actually feel ghosted uh, by their direct manager. And the direct manager will come back and say, I'm not doing it on purpose. I am just so overwhelmed. I don't have the time to respond. I forget. And those people that feel ghosted, that they don't have an available leader, will most likely be looking for an exit. So the job number one to build trust, again, boils down to that relationship and that touch point.
Mhm.
You layer on top of that, which we can get into more and more, is just the shifting dynamics of the actual leadership in and of itself. And as we welcome the native digitals into the workforce and
Mhm.
as they grow, this is a generation that doesn't aspire to lead. And
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
very low percentage of them want to lead. They look at it as an added burden. They look at it as way more than they want to take on. They want a stable, simpler life where they have a much more balanced approach. I don't like the word work-life balance, but that's still out there, but that's what they're looking for. So we're running into this crunch right now where the current leaders, and then let's also talk about the senior leaders,
Mhm.
30% of senior leaders want out, right? Like they're like, this is crazy with all this VUCA and change and uncertainty. Um, so the senior leaders, a lot of them want out. Middle managers are crumbling under the weight of both sides of it. And then not many people, I think last I saw the statistic of 30% only aspire to be a manager or a leader. And so that is the landscape we're working in. And if relationships is what's going to tie these all together, that's where that trust is going to start, where your original question came from. And only when we can have trusting environments will we be able to nurture and grow people that will actually want to be leaders of tomorrow.
So Lev on this point says, I've been in team leadership center seminars. The quality of experience is most often mentioned, expressed as trust. What insight do you have to actually help establish trust on a team?
Mhm. Well, it's, what we find is the great question, by the way, Love.
Mm.
Um, we see four key fallouts of the VUCA world.
Mhm.
One is that leaders aren't available. Second, when leaders are not available, communication breaks down. So you end up having a lot of siloed teams. When you have no availability in siloed teams, you do not have a sense of safety and trust. So psychological safety breaks down. When
Mhm.
those three factors break down, you have complete overwhelm because you feel like you're on your own. So we almost have to go back and start at the top, where we have to teach leaders how to find that availability time, even if it's in minutes and seconds. Trust is built on many, many small investments in a bank account. I like to think of any
Mm.
interaction you have with someone is investing in that relationship. Even if it's just a text send out saying hi in the hall, making sure you're always having eye contact, always saying the name, checking in, how can I best support you today? These little investments into each person that literally don't take a lot of time,
Mhm.
and show that person that they matter, that they're seen, that they're valued. That is how trust is built.
So, I spent 20 years of my life as a headhunter, and that's the domain of new people into an organization. I bring in people that the hiring manager doesn't know. That's why they hired me. So, we know that trust is foundational. We know that it is something that has to be established, I would say, first and foremost. But how do you establish trust two ways between two people who have yet to get to know each other in difficult circumstances?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Right?
And
Because we're all on our best behavior
right.
until things get raw.
And things to, yeah. Well, I think what has to happen sometimes is I want to go back a little bit before we go into the actual skills to kind of set the stage. When we do our training, there's a lot of overall awareness building and some behavioral awarenesses as well. What happens, we find in most every well in every workplace we've worked with, we
Mhm.
find what we call the 580s, and that is the first 80%, and give or take 15% in any organization. Okay, but we'll just call it at 80. Um, 80, actually, usually 90 to 100% of people will say, I'm a good, caring person. I have
Right.
empathy and compassion. So when we're trying to talk about having empathy in the workplace, it doesn't resonate with a lot of people because they consider themselves a compassionate person, right? Um, 80, 90%. The other And you flip that, 80% of people will say, no one has any idea what I'm going through. No one has any idea what's on my plate, my circumstances in life, everything I bring to work each day. So I can see you. I'm a compassionate person, but you know what? No one can see me. Then when we ask the next question, 80%, do you let people know? No. 80%, I do not bring it up. And then then the next question is, do you wish you could? Do you wish you could be more open with everything that you're dealing with? Again, 80% yes. The last 80% is, I just don't have any idea how to tackle this. So this whole new domain, which I would really call the core of the beginning of the book, brings us into what we call the awkward zone. And we're dealing with the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is everybody's walking into work each day really with a lot they're dealing with. And nobody wants to talk about it. And then we're on our screens all day. And the screen interactions are not the same as a human interaction. As anyone that knows the laws of communication, 7% of our communication is words. That's it. 7%, 93%. If you and I are in person, it's the energy between us. It's how fast I'm talking or how slow I'm talking. It's the fidgeting of my hands or the rocking of my leg. It's all of these different things that communicate between people, and screens has taken that away. So as we look into building trust, it starts with the basic things of that manager making sure that they ask those simple questions of what can they do to support that employee. And look, we are not at all getting into prying, making people say what they're dealing with. That's not it at all. But when 80% of people want to be able to be more forthcoming with what they're all dealing with, we have to train leaders to know in the time frames that we have available how to open up those conversations, how to make sure we reduce this amount of people that walk in the door every day that's saying, oh my gosh, they have no clue what I'm dealing with. I can't believe they just said that. I can't believe they're adding this onto my plate. I can't believe this. I can't believe that. Because we're just not connecting in the way that people need in order to handle everything that's on their plate right now. That's where trust is built. And quite honestly, that starts with a very simple exercise we call capacity and demand. And we really try to help leaders create the environment like every day when someone is overwhelmed, they need help just quickly sorting through what is the main thing I need to get done today. And give me permission to take everything else off my plate and just handle this one thing. And so helping leaders know how to guide overwhelmed employees and manage the capacity and demand is a very big part of building the trust.
But even before you get to that, I think you have to model yourself an intentional and yet vulnerable leader, right? I too am dealing with stuff.
Right.
That's got to be difficult for leaders who grew up in this rugged individualist management mindset where football metaphors rule, where you keep your pain on the field, you take one for the team and all that stuff. I mean, I grew up in that environment, especially in my years in the ad agency space where you were celebrated for working 80-hour weeks. They didn't know how completely messed up I was emotionally and physically. But they celebrated it because I worked through the pain. I was surface acting. So what's the first step that somebody could take with a new hire or with somebody who's new to their team or new to their purview to break the ice and let them know, hey, I want to know what to get about you first, but also know I feel it. I'm going through stuff too.
Absolutely. Well, let's go back one more step back to that awkward zone.
Okay.
Because I think when we do our trainings, one of the things we do is we offer an assessment to every leader, to anybody that basically says, here is how I would respond to this exact situation. And so we assess we call them blind spots, barriers as
Mm-hmm.
to how we interact with each other. And so once we can go through and if you think about the awkward zone, there are barriers we all have. And I'd like you to think about someone you know that's dealing with something, you know they're struggling, you have not yet reached out to them. They have no idea that you're even thinking about them, right? You will be falling into one of two buckets. If you know someone's struggling, haven't reached out, you will either be reflecting doubting behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
which are, I don't want to make it worse. I'm afraid if I bring that up, it's just going to create more problems. I don't think I'm the right person to talk to this. Just doubting, fear, awkwardness, kind of in that doubting. So you don't reach out. That person has no idea that you even care. The other side is deflecting. And this happens a lot in the workplace. Deflecting is you just don't even let it sink in. You're just like, there's somebody else to do this. That's for HR. I wasn't trained to do this. Someone else can be better at this than I am. I have my own problems. I can't take that on. And that is in the what you described before as,
Mm-hmm.
the 80-hour work week guy
Mm-hmm.
person, they fall into these deflective behaviors a lot. So first of all, it's helping them understand, yeah, I'm deflecting. Okay, when I deflect, this is what I should do. So those are the top two layers of the awkward zone. The bottom two layers are when we are actually with someone
Mm-hmm.
and we see them and they walk away saying they have no clue what I'm dealing with. So our interpersonal actions are leaving people feeling unseen. And sometimes you have people that just are fixers and they just jump in and do
Right.
this and do this and do that. A lot of people have fixing tendencies.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people have avoidance tendencies. So in the end, before we put that leader in front of that employee, we want to make sure, in essence, those four buckets are either I'm overthinking or underthinking, or I'm overdoing it or I'm underdoing it. And we want leaders to know what traps and blind spots they have. And then we give them the frameworks and the conversation starters, um, maps of how to help engage your employees. And quite honestly, if you have a new employee and you are building up that relationship, you have to start with a lot of small things. You have to start with a lot of small questions. And usually those questions are, how can I best help you do your job today? It's helping with the basic things. And when you help a new employee make sure that they are equipped and supported in their work, then all of a sudden the next questions come. Is there anything you need, like anything else going on that I should be aware of? Anything that's stopping you from doing your best work today? And that's the job of a leader to support that. But what happens is that moves leaders into that awkward space because they're afraid, like, oh my gosh, if they talk about the divorce they're dealing with, I'm not going to know what to say. Or, oh, I know that they have they had a loss in the family and I don't want to bring that up. Like everybody's got stuff. And so that awkward zone is usually that place that everything sits in because we handle it wrong or we don't handle it at all.
And that's why we have you on the show today, because there is so much that doesn't get
I dropped my headphone. Give me 1 second.
Oh, of course. Hey, it's live. Anything can happen.
I know. There you go. Why you shouldn't wear Apple iPods on a podcast. Sorry. Start
It's quite
again.
all right. So in my work as a recruiter, one of the things that I tried to do was to help my hiring manager think through the kinds of situational dynamics that happen on the job so that issues never become problems and problems never become full-grown crises.
Mm.
That said, once somebody's on the job, all bets are off because they might have been masking a behavior that they have. Putting on a surface acting performance that everything is fine, everything is great, when in fact the reason they took this job is to deal with some thing going on in their life. Maybe they needed cash flow, or maybe they have a sick family member, or maybe they themselves have gone through a miscarriage. Gosh, I know about that. My wife went through several of those, and the workplace experience was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think leaders have been equipped well to deal with anything beyond the ROI and the LTV of the work that they are doing, the lifetime value. They may have been brought in because, like I was many years ago, as a subject matter expert, one of a handful in the world who did a certain kind of work. And I could just hear my ex-boss saying, I was never trained to be a social worker, which is very hard to get past when you have that kind of an attitude. And yet, work has changed so much. So much is happening on teams now. Work is no longer the domain of the clock. Work is now the domain of what's gotten done and have we met or exceeded our mission. How do you get then a grizzled old leader or a grizzled young leader to get beyond that silly notion that they have to be trained as a psychotherapist into being somebody who just does little things that go a long way that help to establish trust, so that when things do happen, that person knows I'm for real. I've got their back.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think what I'd like to do is start actually chapter 4 of the new book. We call it the barbell. So to go to an employee, like a leader like that, that leader needs to understand his boundaries and what domain am I working in, and what's expected of me with this new. I can't ask people to leave it at the door anymore. Right? It's not anymore a task-driven workforce; it's a relational workforce, and so it's super important when we train. We partner with the HR department because that leader needs confidence, first of all, but also awareness. And what I always like to say, what our training is, it's very pragmatic. It is very skill based, just as you would have anything in the employee handbook. And that is what human care and support should be. It shouldn't be a touchy feely, emotional driven process. It should be very much a skill driven process that you know with confidence what to do. So we talk about the barbell, which really gets into what are the supports of an organization to help employees, right? Traditionally, you have the HR department. So anyone that was struggling, you would send it to HR, send them to HR, and you'd say, get better. We'll see you back when you're better. HR will handle it. We can't do that anymore. And so what we train leaders with is, look, we call it the barbell of care. And if we consider 3 areas that everyone needs in their life, one would be clinical care. So that clinical care will be one heavy end of the barbell, right? And that is your clinicians, that's your doctors, that's your therapists, that's your counselors, that's anyone that's trained to take care of your body. And that's transactional and it's paid. And that kind of care is, look, here, I'm the expert telling you, here are strategies and things you need to do to care for yourself. Clinical care. On the other side is self-care. Self-care is self-directed, right? Self-care is emotional intelligence, understanding my emotions, regulating my emotions, naming my emotions, understanding how I should sleep, understanding how I should be. Self-care is self-driven, looking inward, your inner work. If I do this, I can do that. So it's very much inner. Now, traditionally in our workplaces, a good workplace right now has those 2 built up, right? Hey, we've got a good AAP program, we've got counselors, we have therapists, and we've got yoga, and we're offering an EQ training and this and that. And that's all really good, but both of those, critical to our care, leave it up to the employee to do all the work. And that's why in our workplaces right now, we need the hand that holds the barbell, which is what we would call supportive care, supportive leadership. That is the one when someone else reaches in and says, Dan, you don't have to deal with this on your own. I'm here to support you. I'm going to walk you through this. So a leader then needs to understand, because that becomes a leader role. It also becomes the role of a coach or the role of a doctor or anyone that is leading someone else through difficulty. And so when we look at that supportive leader element, we are looking at skills that make sure someone understands exactly what they can do with confidence to guide someone along their hardship. What it is not is it's not the clinical care. It's not all even touching on that, because there are clinicians and experts that handle that. But what the leader has to know is, when do I send someone to a mental health counselor? How do I even know if I should send them to a mental health counselor, to HR? I'm afraid I'll lose someone's trust if I send them to HR. And, so a lot of organizations have a management consult with an independent mental health professional that you could call and say, look, I've got this employee. I'm a little concerned about their behavior. I don't want to take it to HR yet. Right. So it becomes very pragmatic. And there's a framework within how they work. Then what we do is framing the support for the employees becomes a twofold thing. And it's a lot of small little actions, but we set the leader up to kind of play a three-part role. One is acting as a mentor. Like, who do I know that this person should know? Like, what other people in this organization would this person get along with? What employee groups are there? Like, what should I recommend, and who should I recommend, and how can I help be a mentor to this person? That's area
Mm,
number one.
mhm,
Area number two is, what do we have right now in that organization that I can connect them with? You mentioned financial problems. A lot of people are walking in the door strapped financially, and a lot of
mhm,
EAPs actually have financial coaching, or they have some sort of financial support. So we want to equip leaders to have like all of that in front of them and say, hey, you know what, Dan, I know, like, your husband lost his job and you're really trying to make ends meet right now. Did you know
yeah,
we've got a financial coach? I want you to see that. Here's the person I'm going to put you in touch with. And then, and so you've got the mentor, you've got the connector to employee resources through the EAP and everything else. And then you have, what is my job? How often should I be checking in with this person? And setting it up for a lot of touch bases. You as a leader should never be the fixer of their problems. You are that's why the book is lifting up. You're
yeah.
literally, you're guiding, you're supporting, you're lifting them up, you're helping. Just like that question I asked, like, who is it in your life that got you here? And that's the impact we make. We make that with our relationships. And leaders should know these quick, pragmatic things that they can do that doesn't take a lot of their time. Their time is in the touch bases. Like, how did that work? Did you talk to that person? What else might you need? What's all on your plate? How can I help
Right.
you this week? And that's how we get through and build the trust. And once that process is in place a little bit, then that person's going to be more comfortable in order to share more about what they're dealing with. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I want to get to Rob's comment because it just made me laugh. In
Rob.
addition to VUCA, we now have BANI, brittleness, anxiety, nonlinearity, and incomprehensibility. Oh my gosh, Rob, you like created an Edvard Munch painting, the scream. Ah! But you know what? And I appreciate that, Rob. You made me chuckle. But to the point of supportive care, it shouldn't be that difficult. It's not something that a manager who's freaking out about BANI has to really give a lot of thought to. HR, if they are proactive, if they've been working with Jen Marr, will provide this person with a list of things that they can respond to and say to a person on their team, hey, I've noticed this. I just want to tee up that we have the following resources in place. You can go to them if you wish, or you don't have to.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Well, and everything that we've said about, these frameworks we set up and the trainings we do, and when we go in, we actually measure all this stuff. We have,
Yeah.
it's sustainable. We will say that the 5 key traits of a supportive leader. First of all, you have to be attentive. Secondly, more than attentive, you have to be attuned, right? Attuned takes a relationship. You can be attentive on emails and all that. You can see what's going on in someone's life, but you have to be attuned to kind of guess what they might need. You also have to be available. And if we go back to those core 4 things, in order for this to work, I think that BANI word, brittleness, anxiety, like, I
Mm,
think what we don't recognize is how it doesn't take much to help people through this stuff. This is not rocket science. It's not long emotional conversations. It is completely the opposite. It is a lot of small touch points that build trust that grow into relationships. So again, we have attentive, attuned, available. We have to be available to our employees. We have to be affirming to them. We have to tell them, you're adding value. I care about you. You matter to this organization. You are really an important part of my team. And then invested. You have to be invested. As a leader's main job is to raise up the next group of leaders, right? A leader's main job is to help someone do their job. And I think sometimes in our previous task-based,
Mhm.
productivity-driven cultures, they're looked more like as taskmasters. And traditionally, that has never been the role of a leader. So, with lifting up and all the work that we're doing, what we try to do is number one, make it very pragmatic, take the emotion out of it. It shouldn't be based on emotions because we know that most people have compassion, but we know that most people don't feel that compassion. So, what are the actions I can do to make someone know that I see them and I'm here to support them? So, pragmatic and doable and measurable and sustainable. And none of these things, when all of our trainings, I can say, like, people walk out and say, oh my gosh, like, not only is this is not one more thing I have to do. This is actually taking a lot off my plate. Because when we avoid these conversations, when we get these conversations wrong, when we don't take the minute or 2 minutes to check in with someone, that's when things unravel. That's where we have my leader's not available, communication breaks down because there's a big difference between informing people and making sure you get through. Like, real communication is making sure I can look someone in the eye and know they got it and that I'm with them. So, you've got to be available, you got to communicate well, then you break down the trust, and then you don't end up with the overwhelm. And so that's what this whole book is about, is to do it in small snippets that is actionable and maintainable.
In my earliest working days in advertising, and as a 27-year-old working on a piece of business that I dealt with 13% of my agency's annual billings, was a lot of responsibility. And because I was dealing with all the touch points and all the things that could go boom, I was completely both unaware of and purposely avoiding how I related to my coworkers. And I recognize that. I probably was uh, standoffish when I had a deliverable that I had to make happen. But that's because I was an individual contributor oftentimes, and I had people working for me, but everything went through me. I think in the leadership milieu that we are now working in, where so much of work now, and I would argue the vast majority of forward-thinking businesses operate as teams with multiple touch points and multiple people doing multiple things to get to a successful conclusion. That old style of manager that I was, and certainly the bosses that I had, are a terrible mismatch. But who are the best matches? And I think to myself, two models. One is my wife,
Mhm.
who was trained in theater and knew how to get through the scene, right? The other, and I think I mentioned this to you, Jen, because you once lived in Northern Virginia, are the many military veterans that
Mhm.
I knew who built successful leadership in the theater of battle, in Afghanistan, in a forward base
Mhm.
in Iraq, if you will. What are your thoughts on that? Have you worked with people like that who brought a
Mhm.
certain existential skill set, if you will, to work in a next level career in corporate life or in some sort of a team leadership role? What are your thoughts?
Mm. Oh my gosh, there's so much science behind what you're saying. And there are a lot of studies that absolutely what you say, if you've got someone with lived experience that now is going to help someone with that kind of similar lived experience,
Mhm.
that there is that emotional connection and someone really can dive deeper into helping that person, right? I think when we're talking about leadership, we have to be very clear that that does not need to be the role of a leader. The
Mhm.
role of a leader does not need to dive into that. Now, I also want to say the research studies that we've done have taken people with complete lack of empathy, compassion, whether it's lived skills or not, um, and taught them how to want to help someone. So
Mm,
I think, you cannot reason empathy and compassion with someone. You
mhm,
really can't. What you have to do is you have to give them the skills to use that all of a sudden, when they do that, it feels better than life without it. And we
mm,
know relational skills will always win out, always. But I can't say, Dan, go be compassionate to that
right.
employee. And so the research that we did, funded through the New York Office of Mental Health, by the way, basically showed that once you give someone the skills and you just say, do that, when this comes up, do that, all of a sudden it feels better to do that than not to do it. And you'll want to do more of it. And that is basically tapping into your human wiring and how we are built. We are relational beings,
Mhm.
and when we are good relational beings to someone else, it feels right. But most people just don't have the skills to know how to do that. So back to your question, like,
Mhm.
someone that is gone through traumatic, and my work, by the way, was founded in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting and the Boston
Mm,
Marathon bombing. So
mm,
my work was all started um, in the aftermath of severe crisis.
mm,
And it was in seeing that it wasn't the clinicians, it wasn't even the ones that with lived experience that came in that helped. It was the people in their everyday lives that would otherwise avoid them because of the awkwardness of it,
mm,
that they need to pull them through difficult times, right? So teachers at Sandy Hook would walk into the supermarket, their friends would walk down the next aisle because they didn't know what to say. Like, this awkward zone of human interaction when people are facing hardship is really where we are failing right now. And so when we talk about, empathy being the number one skill, we need compassionate leadership, those phrases are true. But an emotion is a noun, it's a feeling. You can't be empathied by someone, you can't be compassionate by someone. And we know that 80% of people feel that they're already that way. So if we really want to bring these behaviors into the workplace, we have to give them the skills. Going back to my research studies that I did, here, Dan, do this. You might be having the worst day of your life and you've got an employee that's having a crisis. You're going to need to know what to do. You're not going to be able to tap into your emotions. So we need the black and white skills, which
yeah.
is why this playbook I have in the back of this book is literally, here's how you have your first conversation. These are the 10 points of your first conversation. Here's how you follow up from that. Here's your next conversation after that. Here's your next conversation. Black and white, take the emotion out of it. It's only going to take, some conversations might be a little longer, but it shouldn't take any more than 5 minutes each time. And that's how we start putting the investments back into our relationships that are going to make people feel trusted and good about being at work because they're not in it alone.
Well, you really touched my soul on that Sandy Hook comment. One of my closest friends lives in Newtown, Connecticut. Her child
Wow.
went to Sandy Hook as a little kid. So you can imagine the stress of that lived experience. But then also Diane had the experience of meeting up with people at the supermarket and not knowing what to say. And I think in the wake of 9/11, a lot of other people had that experience as well. And so, hey, it's another reason why you got to get Jen's book. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I want to pivot here to something that came to mind a couple of days ago from Meg, who talked about doom loops. And oh my gosh, this is such a big part of teams that are are struggling, where one stressor steamrolls another, and then something comes in from left field and so forth. Meg by contrast, asks about ambition loops and could they be the antidote to setting big, noble goals and early wins? And for those who don't know what an ambition loop is, let me get to it. It's a reinforcing cycle in which bold goals and ambitions drive actions, which then create positive momentum and outcomes that make it easier and more compelling to set even bigger goals. The ambition leads to progress, which in turn reinforces and elevates ambitions. What do you have to say about ambition loops, Jen?
That's cool. I like that. I think it kind of reminds me of the word hope. And
Mm,
I think what organizations right now are lacking and leaders are having a hard time conveying is that sense of hope. And one of the areas in the book that we really tackle this is we call it relationships 101.
mm,
And what what do people really need? Like going back to the basics, right? People people are uncertain. They need guidance. They want hope. They want to follow a good leader. They want, like, there's a whole list of 10 of these. And so I love this concept of, and this ultimately would be these constant touch points of
mm,
someone when you're having those one-on-ones and you're trying to guide people through difficulty. You are also pulling out the hopeful aspects. I see you going here. Have you ever thought of doing that? Like, wow, why don't we try this? And then your next one-on-one is, that's excellent. You did a great job. Let's try this. That's, I think, the ambition loop she's talking about.
right.
A supportive leader, excuse me, will pull away from those doom loops to try to give hope. Excuse me.
I think you're right. Um, when I heard about ambition loops, it made me think about a company that I was dying to work for early on in my career. It was a company called Daytimers. And if you're of a certain age, you will all remember what a daytimer was. It was a physical date book that you used to manage your schedule. It was as analog could be. It had little perforated edges where you could tear off when the day was done. The reason why I bring this up and why I think it aligns with ambition loops is that everything that this company did, every engagement that they had, tried very hard to build quality and positive experience into. Now, that's why so many people wanted to work for daytimers like me and couldn't get an interview because it was a fun experience. People loved going to the office. They loved going to work. Every day was a new positive adventure, right? And I think that would be a model for a lot of companies and a lot of leadership
Mhm,
teams who are struggling, for whom engagement is a problem.
mhm,
It's the little things that people remember, the little kindnesses, the little the fact that you remembered that I'm dealing with something and you cared enough to talk about that self-care supportive opportunity that I would not have known about. And it was
mhm.
no big deal for you to tell me about because you were prepared to tell me about something that I didn't know. And I took you up on it and I reached out to that third party and it's made my experience better. Right?
No, I love what you're saying. And I think so much of our world has gone to a self-led model.
Mm,
People pride themselves for being independent, being self-sufficient. Um, and people, especially when we're in our screen world, it almost becomes a bother when people chime in. We
right.
just want our alone time with our screen so we can be the most productive self, right? When we are living through this self-led, self-sufficiency, independent mindset, um, those relational interactions many times come secondary. And these self-led initiatives then take over in bigger concepts like resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in organizations, going back to what you said with daytimers, it's kind of like this fun workplace. People are always looking out for each other. Um, but even resilience now has become almost a self-led initiative. If you've got people, like, I go into so many organizations and they're like, these guys just need to be resilient.
Mm,
And I took a long chapter of my book to break down why resilience is actually a byproduct of a supportive team. You can't teach someone resilience and put them back in a workplace where your leader's not available, where you're communicating in silos, where there's no psychological safety and you're overwhelmed. There is no resilience course in the world that's going to be effective when you're operating in that environment.
Right.
There's a study out of Oxford with, I want to say, 46,000 participants in 230 organizations, like massive. And they asked, are self-led preventative measures responsible for increasing well-being? So resilience, stress management, all of these things.
Yeah.
And out of that massive thing, zero,
Yeah.
because it's all environmental driven.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big difference between daytimers, what it used to be,
Right.
and what it's moved to now. And as we move to AI even taking on more, it's these relational interactions that are going to create the resilience. It's going to create the fun like daytimers. And we have to be a little more attuned, attentive, affirming, available, and invested in our employees to bring that kind of a team environment back.
We've run out of time. I've got one question that Kenny is going to ask, which is on LinkedIn earlier today. You wrote, and I quote, "Nobody will remember you for your job, but they will remember how you made them feel," end quote. And Kenny wants to know, how did you discover that insight?
Oh, Ken, thank you for that question. You know what? I live that insight every day. That's almost my driving why. Um, it's people need people. And the trainings that I have done over the years is all around those human behavioral skills of making sure someone says, I remember how they made me feel. Like that felt so good. They saw me, they got me, they helped me, they supported me, they valued me, they liked me, they cherished me, they heard me, they understood me, like all of those things that we're missing today. And it's never about the job, it's always about the relationship. So thanks for that question.
Thank you, Kenny. I saved it for the last because I thought it was going to be a great wrap up question. We've run out of time today, and before I get to my final question, I want to give you the opportunity, Jen, to point our viewers and listeners to where they can find you on social media, where they can read up on your insight, get a copy of your book, or perhaps even just say hi. How would they do that?
Please reach out. I love building a community around this work. It's what I do. My organization is called Showing Up. You can find us at showing-up.com. And we have a whole community of certified trainers and of trainings and of workshops and webinars. And we're creating this community of people that have a train the trainer model to get it out into the world. So if you want to learn more about that, showing-up.com. Please follow me on LinkedIn if you're not already. I post there every day. And Lifting Up will be out on May 27th. And super excited. Would love to talk to you about getting this work out or joining one of our trainings or anything if you want more information. It's our goal. I am just not someone that wrote a book that goes out and talks about it. We actually have measurable, scalable, sustainable training that will actually put this out and sustainable in the workplace. Thank you, Dan.
To my tribe, get this book because I think it will be very helpful to you, especially if you are on a team and if you're leading a team. There's some actionable steps and insight in the pages. Thank you so much, Jen. I'm going to ask you one last question, but before I just say, when we cut to the end of the show, if you can stick around, I'd love to wrap up.
Perfect.
So let's get to it. What's your work fit, Jen? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes the work that you do a wonderful part of your day doing other wonderful things? And here's the operative part, not the all-consuming time suck of a day. What's your work fit?
My work fit, Dan, is all around relationships, relational and social wellness. We get through life with each other. We have to know each other. We have to know what to look for in each other. We need to know how to show up for people, and we need to know how to lift up others, whether that is at work, whether it's at home, whether it's my daughter's giving me the most amazing Mother's Day cards that lifted me up. Knowing how to do those things, when we have these showing up and lifting up skills in our lives, it deepens our relationships. We find the right people to work for. We find the right people around us. And that's what we do. We show up and lift up for each other. That's how this chapter of my life is unfolding, and I'm going to stick with it.
Thank you for the privilege of your time today, Jen. Can we invite you back to continue this conversation at a later date?
Of course. Would love to chat more. You have to read the book, and then you'll have 900 more questions.
Oh, I intend to read the book. I'm going to pre-order it this week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone, for joining.